Good evening. Good evening, everyone. It's such a pleasure to welcome you to this finally wonderful weather, clean air evening here at the parish today. My name is Mónica Ramírez Montagut. I am the newish director here at the Parish Art Museum. This month is my 1-year anniversary, and what a better way, thank you. And what a better way than to welcome JR to the facade of our iconic building that turned 10 years old this last year, and a work by him in the lobby. I have to say that I'm gonna start giggling because I'm starstruck with JR. I have followed his career for like 10 years. I went to Colombia, Medellin, to visit some friends, and they took me to this very depressed neighborhood that the government had built like a system of lifts for public transportation to really make sure that this disenfranchised community had better access to their jobs and their schools and their communities. And in that trip, I saw on the rooftops of this handmade vernacular architecture neighborhood the portraits of the people living in those neighborhoods. And I was so touched and so moved and so intrigued because I didn't know what it was. Is this art? You know, can I learn a little bit more? So I've been following his career for a while. We worked together in a project in Michigan State University also a year ago, where his team came and took photos of our community of students, young adults, youth, refugees, immigrants, and we posted those portraits on the museum facade. And it was just like an incredible experience for the whole community. And then we also purchased one of his magnificent photographs for that collection in Michigan State. And it was about the residents of a prison in California called Tehacapi. And the photo shows the portraits of all the residents of that prison. But also, if you were to look at the photo through JR's app, you can actually access the story of the folks that he's photographing. So it's a multi-layered, multi-dimensional, very, very human kind of work that I admire. I admire the fact that social justice is an agenda, accessibility is an agenda, and making sure that we can transform our lives and others for the better through art. And so I'm looking forward to this talk as much as you all are. And now I'm going to introduce my colleague Corinne Ernie, Chief Curator at the Parish Art Museum, to properly introduce JR. This was just the emotional prologue.
Thank you, Monica, and welcome everyone. It's so wonderful to see such a big crowd here for JR, and you're certainly in for a big treat tonight. So I'm sure that everybody has seen the children running towards you as you drove by our facade. And these children are part of, they're called Les Enfants d'Uranos. It's a brand new project by JR. The mural is about 200 feet long. And JR will talk about the project, but basically it's part of another longer series that he's been working on called Déplacé. And déplacé in French means the displaced. And I think it's really a wonderful mural to have here with the spirit of these children, even though they grow up in refugee camps, but they're still playful. And I think it's a beautiful image to project onto our neighborhood here. So I just want to give you a little bit of a background about JR, and also wanted to let you know that he will be signing his most recent book. It's a fabulous book outside the theater right after this talk. The book is called Artist Until I Find a Real Job, and we do hope that you're never going to find a real job, JR. So anyway, he was born in 1983 in Paris, France, and he works at the intersection of photography, public art, filmmaking, and social engagement. And over the last 2 decades, he has developed multiple public projects and site-specific interventions in cities all over the world, from buildings in the slums around Paris to the walls in the Middle East, and Africa to the favelas of Brazil. And I really want to thank to all of those who have made this incredible project possible. First of all, Dougal Visual Solutions. I'm sure we have some of you in the room here today. It was an incredible way to witness how you put up that mural. Then also Perrontin Gallery, Alexandra Stanton and Sam Natapov, Domna Stanton and Susan and Frank Dunlevy, and the Dunlevy family Charitable Fund. So thank you, everyone. Thank you. JR.
Thank you. Let me see. Okay, I'll do it with this mic if you can hear me. I thought I'll tell you a little bit of the story of different projects and how my work function, and then I'll go into telling you the story about how this project came about. But I'll check on the time so that we could maybe do Q&A. I think that's always a better way also of progressing through the talk. So I might stop in the middle of a story just so that I could, make sure that we talk together. The truth is, it all started with me doing graffiti when I was a kid. When I was 14, 15, I was just writing my name on walls, and I guess when you do that, it's a way of saying, I'm here, I exist, And I guess now that I think, at the time you just do it instinctively, but, with the time I realized why was I so focused in going and climbing rooftop and going in tunnels just to write my name so that basically only people who could read graffiti would understand it. And I've done that for years, and one day I found a camera in the subway. Not a good one, it was a pretty cheap one, but it had a strong flash, and that was just before digital, The photography was not accessible to everyone, and where I come from, it was not something that I would have even, I've never studied art, I'd never been in museum or galleries, I didn't knew about all this world, so I really come in a very naive way into it, because I didn't know that I was actually doing art, It's people who came to me and say, well, what you're doing is art, and it's in this lineage and this and that, but to me it's always been more instinctively that I was progressing. And so at the time when I found that camera, all I thought was, oh, let me document my friends writing their names on walls, in the tunnels, on the rooftops. And so I took photos, and those photos, I would paste them. So here's just a photo of the frame that would last, but I would paste them inside those frames. And because I would come and frame them with my paint, because nobody would notice those little A4 or A3 format. And so this is on the Champs-Élysées. At the time, I was probably 17, 18. I thought that exhibiting on the Champs-Élysées was, like the biggest thing you could do, And so I would go there, actually during the day. People think you have to do this at night, but I would do it in full daylight in front of everybody on the 24th of December when everybody's doing Christmas shopping. I would just walk, and very calmly, I would just start, painting on the palisades that, like this one, I think was the future Cartier store, and I was like, oh, that could do a great, background for my exhibition. And when they would remove my photos, the frame would stay. And then I took my friend in photo, and in another project at the one I grew up close by, and he was holding his video camera like a gun. And I took a few photos, and at that time, I was like, you know what? I need to find something bigger than those little photos, because I've done that for a couple of years, but this photo have something a bit more meaningful. I don't know. I was really not prepared for that photo. It was just, I was doing photo that day, and we were just playing, and I'm like, oh wait, let me try to find a way to enlarge it. And that was the first time that I found architect plans machine. And so you see, it's strips of papers. And that was really the first time that I enlarge them and try to also find a way to paste them, you see, because the ladder doesn't go that high, so you need to reach the rest. So for this, I use some poles to clean the pool, and then I attach a brush to clean the floor. But then the strip would go over the brush and fall back on us. So this took me maybe 7 or 8 hours. So at the time, no one would hire me to do, wallpaper job. By now, I'm way better, so if you need wallpaper in your bathroom, you can contact me. But at the time, it was really long. The thing is, we didn't want to get arrested, because I forgot to mention that, but I did this illegally. And so the way to do that, I asked all my friends in the neighborhood to, instead of staying a few guys here, a few guys there, say, let's everybody just hang where I'm pasting. And so hundreds of kids were just staying there. So when the police would pass, this is one of the worst neighborhoods in France, it's called Montfermeil-les-Bosquets. And so they were not interfere. They were just like, okay, well, you know what, just let it be. And what happened is the mayor sued me on the next day for the, pasting on those buildings with no permits. The thing is, when he came and he sued JR, it was pretty hard to, who's JR? JR from Dallas or which JR? And so basically, I never got to pay any fine. He could never find me. And that's one of the reasons why also I stay under my initials. The thing is then he said, I'm going to send the cleaning people to just clean this. And the people from the neighborhood said, no, if you touch this, you'll have a riot. And so the photos stayed. And they stayed, and it was the beginning of blogs on internet, and so, it spreads online like that, and some people, like tourists, would actually go and see it, and this is the worst neighborhood in France to walk in, and people would just come to see the exhibition, and people in the neighborhood were so proud to say, yes, this is us, and, come and we'll show you this other building or this other one. And a year later, I don't know if you remember, it was in 2005, there was a terrible incident that happened there, that two kids were chased by the police and they hid in an electric box that was right in front of this photo, right there, and they died. And so that started the largest riots we had in France since the French Revolution. It was 2005, you would think that Paris was burning, it spread to all neighborhoods around France, and it started there. So this neighborhood got on total lockdown, helicopters flying, and the army went in. It was really an insane moment, but my photos were in the background, and I was on the cover of New York Times, but not for my work, for being the background of the largest riots. So that's how my career started, basically, because that's when people noticed my work on that cover of New York Times, and then journalists couldn't enter there, so they came to me and they say, well, I had this website, and so they contacted me, and then I gave them a meeting in the corner of the neighborhood, and there's the head of an agency from the US, and he said, okay, well, I was there with my friend that you see in the photo. He said, we'll pay you, and you take photos of your friends burning those cars and stuff. And I was like, no, that's not what I do. I do those photos. If you want, you can publish them. It's like, no, that's not exactly how it works. It's great that you did this, but we're not interested in your work. That's what we need. We can't send any journalists in. And so, you're the only one that can enter, so can you take those photos? And, I was so naive. I didn't even know there was a job for being a photojournalist or whatever. I went and talked to my friend. I was like, this is a bit weird. I don't think we should do this. And we went back to him and said, no, we're not interested, but if you want, you can still publish our photos. And then he said, no, I won't do that. And I think that day, without thinking, is the day I decided to be an artist, because then I started taking portraits of my friend living in the neighborhood and pasting them in Paris. And that began the journey of the series of portraits. Instead of writing my name on walls, I started pasting people's face on wall by writing their name in a way. Their faces would be their name on walls. And then I started there, and then I went in the Middle East. That was a project that I've done right after that in 2006, 2007, just when they built the wall. And I would photograph Israeli and Palestinians doing the same job. So you see here, you have two taxi drivers, two students, two teachers, two kids, two security guards, and we would go in cities in Israel and in Palestine, and we also pasted the wall and also the three religious, and people would stop and say, I'm sorry, what are you doing? I was like, I'm pasting photos. They say, yeah, I can see that, but who are those people? And I say, they are two taxi drivers. Oh, they're like, okay, good for you. And then they say, but why are you pasting two taxi drivers? And I say, well, it's an art project, and also one is Israeli and one is Palestinian. And there would be a long silence, and they look, and then I say, well, can you recognize who's your brother and who's your enemy? And they were like, yeah, of course I can recognize. And they'll say, that's the Israeli. And then I say, no, it's not the Israeli, that's the Palestinian, but it's okay, you have another chance. And actually, in each place, people say, well, we're open-minded here, we'll let you do it. But if you go on the other side, they'll kill you alive. And then when I would go on the other side and do it, they'd say, well, we're open-minded, we'll let you do this. But on the other side, and so actually the interesting thing in that project was the documentary of it. There's a film, it's actually, I think, for free online, it's called Faces, and you can find it on Vimeo. And you see, I'm really young and I'm 21, I know nothing, I get arrested on day one, the army arrests me, they refer me to the police, the head of the police takes me there and is like, what I'm gonna do with you, you gotta leave this country right away, this is the whole paper. And then he kicked me out, and then I'm there, and I'm supposed to go by myself to the airport, so I said, let me go back until they really put me in the plane. And so we did that whole project on a notice of eviction, and the people were the ones who let us paste on each of those places. And so I kept on doing this. Those are the nuns that recognize the priest, and they came and paced. And so the truth is, I realized, okay, wow, art have this incredible power of also creating those moments that would never happen. Um, then I went in Brazil, in the favelas of Rio, and I started doing this project about women and how they are the pillars of their community, but they're the first victim in case of violence and war. And so I've done it in lots of places because I've never traveled before, so it was a way for me to suddenly be like, oh wow, let's see where this art thing can take me. And I would go in places, where I basically would fly myself and start walking with the community. And each time I was, thinking, okay, this is the place where they'll say it's no place for art. But each time they would tell me, well, who do you think and who you are to tell us that you would even think that this is not a place for art? Art is needed everywhere, and we need it here, even if we have, of course, other priority. We also need art. And so the people from this community, this is the first favela in Brazil, but it's also one of the most violent. It's called Providencia. And they helped me paste it over 24 days, covering the whole hill. At the end, there was helicopters flying because the police can't enter, the city can't enter, even if it's in the center of Rio. And so there would be messages on television that say, if you know what's going on those hills, who are those eyes, please call this number. And then I left before doing a single interview. And so the women were the one on television talking about what it meant for them. And then I started, people would send me those interviews. And I was like, wow, that's actually, their narrative is much more interesting than, if I had talked, what would I say? Their perspective on it, or what art means for them, is so much more interesting. So I started more and more from that time, taking a distance and try to always be further in the shadow of the work, because when you truly want to put someone's name on the front, it's better to actually let the people talk. And so that's always been the process of involving people. This is also there in the favela. This is the stair that go up to the top. And it was the first time that I did anamorph. So it looks like a wall, but the stairs is actually very, like a diagonal, like that, like any stairs. But this first time that I stretch an image to kind of give it this perspective. And I went to Kenya, and when I was there in one of the largest slums in Africa, in Kibera, the people were like, well, it's interesting what you do, but why don't you, put the rest of the faces? We don't really understand. And then the train came. And then the train actually would just pass by there, but it doesn't stop there. And so I had actually put all the eyes of the woman from Brazil, India, Cambodia, from all the places, and they would always connect with the faces. Now, the thing in a place like that is people told me art needs to have a meaning. So you can't just do art if it doesn't have another purpose than the question it raised. And here, for example, all the bottom of the faces were made in corrugated. And so at the end, we distribute to the population the corrugated, so the nose and created the nose of the school, and the teeth here went back to one of the women, and everyone, it was kind of a whole organization to make sure it goes to the right people after. And the train kept running with the eyes. And if you see, that's a good trick if you go to Kenya. If you're outside of the train, you don't pay. So I'm just telling you this trick. If you sit on the top or outside, you won't have to pay a ticket. So that's why you see so many people standing out. And then I realized, you know what, that there is wall or no wall, it doesn't matter. Because you can create the structure to invent images. And that was more recently in my work. And it gave me lots of ideas, because then suddenly I'm like, wow, the city is a playground now. I can go and make someone jump over a building. And so suddenly I started relooking at landscape in a whole different way. This is a small museum we have in Paris. I don't know if you heard about it. It's called the Louvre. And it's interesting because normally you exhibit there when you're dead, so it's a bad news. But a couple of years ago, the president of the Louvre said, we'd love to invite you to do a piece. And I was like, wow, okay, but I really don't have any idea, because I never even thought of doing a piece here. So I just walked to the center square, and I look at people coming from around the world. And what they do is very simple. They arrive and they stand in front of the pyramid, and they turn their back to it and take a selfie. And I was like, how interesting is that? That people just travel from around the world to turn their back to the monument they come to see. So I made it disappear. So what you see is the actual pyramid is there, but I pasted the building that's in the back on top of it. So from any side, you would actually see the pyramid, but from the front, that's what you would see. So it created a line to photograph it from an exact point where you would have this effect. And so every day I would go and also take photos, but I had to do the line, and sometimes I would talk to the people in the line, and I say, why are you lining for? I'm like, I don't know, just everyone is lining, so I'm lining. And there was 2 ladies one time, and I say, but people are lining to take a photo. Oh, great, that's great. Well, we'll do also. And I said, oh, you want me to take it? You have a camera? I said, no, we don't have a camera. And so it would bring those amazing, moments of, that is kind of the definition of my work, and I'll get to that, of connecting people, and doesn't matter if it's connecting people to paste the actual artwork or connecting people to actually, be in the process. And a couple years after, the Louvre came back to me and say, well, we would love to invite you again. I was like, really? I mean, am I dead now? What's happening? Say, no, we'd love to give you another shot at the Louvre because you brought such a different range of public to our museum, and that maybe you could do a different one. And I said, okay, if I made the pyramid disappear, maybe I could make it appear this time. And so actually this time, with 400 people a day for a week, we pasted, this is all paper, strips of papers. There's actually 1,800, or I forgot the number, but like a lot. And it's a giant puzzle. This is the size of one person, and the pyramid is right here, you see? So the pyramid is just this, and then the rest is paper all over. And then we opened it on the Friday, but the process was the art, the fact of hundreds of people every day pasting together, making this giant puzzle. And then when thousands of people came on the Saturday for the opening, the more they walked on it, the more it disappeared under their feet, because it's just paper, so it's ephemeral. So it lasted a few days, but not more than that. And people were very confused about that, because they were like, well, how is it disappear? Is this pollution? Is this art that we should keep and frame in our house? Is this, people were really, like, kids were just going and scratching it down. It was a real shit show. And the truth is, it was amazing because, the art was alive in the museum, and the fact that there was this confusion, to me, is the heart of art in general. It is supposed to raise questions, not necessarily to give answers. And I think people were confused because they were hoping that I would tell them how to feel about it, but I was actually hoping that they tell me how they feel about it. And now I travel around the world, and I often see, in someone's home, a piece of that floor, And so it's amazing to see how I travel. During COVID, actually, all museums were closed, so I started doing some big scars into museums so that you could see through them. And I started doing those installations. This was in Italy when it was in full lockdown on a museum in Florence and Palazzo Strozzi. And so I started playing more and more with architecture. But the heart of my technique is really, those strips. Like I show you this one. This was in New York. This was the photo of a kid from Azerbaijan, and how migrants can be sometimes in the shadow of the city. And when I pasted him with my team early morning, the printer didn't work well. That's why you actually see the strips. But it's a good way to understand how the puzzle is made on this one. And people, it's on Flatiron Plaza in New York. They walk in the morning, and then it was a Saturday. People were eating ice cream and walking on him. They didn't notice him because it's so big. But then I flew above, and then I took that photo, and everyone else went in the shadow, and he went in the light. And this was the cover of New York Times a couple of years ago. So with this technique, there's a lot of things you can do. This is the border between US and Mexico, and that little kid is 1 year old. He's called Kikito, and he actually lived with his mother right here on that house. And so I decided to enlarge him, so to give a perspective of what a 1 year and a half kid is actually thinking about a fence, about a wall, about a border. And same thing, we did this illegally. So usually when I cross border, I take off my hat and glasses, and I just, walk as that's how I become anonymous again. And that was the day we were not even done, you see, because we were still cutting the wood here. But I came on that side in the US, and then I saw those two border patrol looking at it, so I took that photo. And then I posted it, and I say, you know what? If you want, you can actually come and see the walk, because this is a road that you can take in the US, with your car, with your bike. It's in Tecate, and this is the point to see the walk. So hundreds of people and thousands of people started to come, and the thing is that people from the other side also started coming, and then people would see each other through the wall. And then they started exchanging their phone to take each other selfies. And the thing is, I saw that online, and I was a bit surprised that they're not getting arrested, because this is one of the places where the Border Patrol are the most active. There's a helicopter every few minutes. There is Border Patrol all the time. They erase the trace of the cars to see if someone have walked through. And when I did this on the other side, we actually dig the floor and build the scaffolding, all of this illegally. We rented caterpillars, and when I was just waiting for them to come and tell me, you can't do this. And I'd say, oh, I'm so sorry, I didn't know. I've come from France, I didn't know how to read the manual. But no one said. And actually, it was really interesting that they never came and arrested us. They watched this thing come up 3 times the size of the wall on the Mexican side, but very close from the wall, which technically is still the US, because they leave like a demarcation so they can enter without having a permit to us, the Mexicans. And so it was really a blurry line, but they never stopped us. And so what happened is, after a month, we decided to come back and do a lunch about, to finish this project, and to say, okay, let's actually gather everyone and do a finissage, of the project. And so we actually built a table through the wall. So this is Mexico, and then from here, this is US. And people sat and ate together like if there was no wall. The thing is, on the US, we had to use a tarp on the floor, and in Mexico, we built a table because we felt more comfortable there. There was less border patrol. But in the US, we had to actually be very quick. The thing is that for the first 5 minutes, I was like, okay, everybody sit, let's just eat, and let's send the drone up and take a photo, so we pretend we're eating. But the truth is, after 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, no one would come. So I say, okay, well, actually, let's eat, So we had some tacos being made here. There's a little stand, so we would pass some illegal tacos through the wall. And then, if you can see here, you see here is a band of 5 guys, but here is the other side of the band, the one who had visas or passport that would go on the US, but it's the same band, so they play the same music. And the taco stand is here, and then people started singing and eating, and after maybe an hour or an hour 15, suddenly, a border patrol car arrived, so everyone's panic, and I say, well, tell him to come to me. The guy was by himself, and I was in Mexico, so I was safe, so I say, I'm here, and so he came, and we met through the fence, and actually, I'll show you a video after, but we offered him tea, and he took it, and then we chinned, and there was a video made of that. And I asked him, I said, can I post that video, sir, because you've been so kind to us? And he said, yeah, no, I didn't come to arrest you. I'm just saying that maybe you shouldn't push a bit longer, Maybe it's time for desserts and you get the fuck out of here. And I was like, okay. And so I said, but can I post the video of us having tea? And he said, yeah, sure. But I said, sir, I don't want you to be in any trouble because you've been so kind to us, and, we can see on your badge your number and stuff. And he said, no, you can. I said, no, give me your number. I'll call you later. And so I called him on that night, and I said, sir, I just want to be sure. Are you okay that I post that video? And he said, no, you can. And the video went viral, but we stayed friends. And you know what? I opened the show 3 months ago in Torino, and now he's retired because this was 4 or 5 years ago, and he retired a year after. He came with 2 other border patrol in Torino, Italy, and they were there in my show, standing like this. The show, and it was very interesting because they thought I told them, come, there's a dinner after, and say, no, we don't allow to go, and I'm like, What do you mean you're not allowed? Like, art is for everyone. If you're here, you're invited. There's no boundaries. But it was very interesting because in their mind, they think they didn't have access to a museum. They've never walked into a museum. And so I told him, I said, no, you're a very important part of this because on that day you made the decision to let this happen. By doing this, you set a mark. You send a very strong message because this was a very small lunch. You know, it's I don't know, probably 100 people, that's it. But this shows that the limits are not where we think they are. And by sending a message like that, it gives hope. And that's sometimes what art can do, but it can only do it because there's shadow angels that are there and that decide that it can happen. So this is a very important part because like this guy, there's been many other people along the way in different places that have made it possible. This was to support the Iranian women, and so I don't know if you see, but it's only people making the hair, you know, of one of the women that passed away at the beginning of the fight. So this was very recent. This was this winter, and so we've done it in different locations. So it was just to show you a little range of the kind of work that it's photography, but I'm not a photographer. I use photography to bring people together, no matter if they're part of the photography, if they're pasting the photography, or if they come to actually document it. But in all of those processes, the people do meet, and that's always the key and at the heart of what I do. Now, what I want to show you is how this whole project that you're seeing in the museum started. And it actually started a year ago, because a year ago, a little bit more actually than a year ago, the war in Ukraine started. And I realized that I could drive from my house in Paris to this war. And it was the closest war that ever happened close to, you know, to my house. When you live in Europe, it's like, oh my God, this is at our door. So I was like, how can I do something that in Ukraine? And I met this guy, you know, at the border, and first by WhatsApp, and I asked him, hey, can you send me photos of what you see? And he sent me this photo of this little girl that he took with his phone. So we printed it like this, you know, we printed on a tarp, and but like very big, 180 feet long. And we went to the border of Poland, and then we rolled it, and we took it in our car all the way to the border, but then we took it out of the car and put it on a trolley, and then we crossed the border. So to enter Ukraine, actually, in this middle of the war, it's actually easy going that way because no one wants to go in, you know? So there was no line. When we arrived there, I've met some people online, and this guy and a lot of other young people from there, and I met them just through social media because they were telling me, why don't you do something? And I was like, but what do you want me to do? I mean, how art could be important in a moment like that? They said, no, it's more than important. We need art, even if the war just started. This is the moment where we need to show that there are people. And so this guy was organizing a music festival that's very successful, you know, a couple months before, and now suddenly he's there stuck in the country trying to see what he can do before he have to join the army. And so it's a bunch of kids like him that welcomed us and that drove us through, you know, the barricades and to one of the largest cities in the west side of Ukraine called Lviv. And so there we were in his van and with the banner on the back, and I had told him previously, I said, you know, to do this image, because we can't paste, I need you to gather like hundreds of people, you know? And so he was telling me, I got those hundreds of people, but I had to fact check everyone so that there's no spy. So very quickly, that was the moment where I explained them, okay, this is what we're gonna do, and we gotta go super fast. We're gonna open this image and of this little girl, and we printed it, but we've never, you know, opened it. So everyone came together and we started opening it, and more people joined and started marching with the image through the city. Soldier, women, little kids. It was really amazing in the middle of the war to see people coming from all over the streets where the buildings were barricaded and started carrying this image. And then we FaceTimed the little girl actually because she made it safely to Poland. And so we were telling her that we actually enlarged her photo, and with the permission of her mother and her father, who's still in Ukraine at that time, we told her that we were opening her image. And so the way that I had to come with this technique is that I would gather everyone, and then everyone would open the image at the same time. Thank you. And the idea was very simple. The idea was that the plane who are bombarding would see that they are also kids. And so the image would be large enough so that the planes would see them as they're bombarding. And so at that time, we actually took the image and then we took it out with us. It made the cover of Time the week after. And then we were like, what do we do with this image? And so I called them back in Ukraine and I say, what do you think we should do? And they say, no, it's like anything. We'll disappear at some point slowly from your news. So please keep opening it. And so what we did is very simple. We started going in cities, so if I remember, we're looking at the floor. In the middle one here is Paris. This one is probably in Germany. This one is in Rome. Each of those places would gather hundreds or thousands of people to open it. Sometimes I would not even go. We would just send the banner and people would say, hey, we live in Dublin or whatever. Can you send the banner? We'll open it. And people will organize everything themselves. And it was even the main piece at the pavilion of Ukraine that they did at the Venice Biennale. And so the banner had to stop traveling for a moment just to stand there and then went back on the road. And so basically, I started this project called Déplacé because at that time, that little girl that you saw called Valeria, she was being moved from Ukraine. She had to suddenly be in Poland or in France or in Europe. And there is this same kind of situation happening around the world in different places. So we started looking at all those places where the same situation had happened in the past, sometime 10 years ago, sometime recently, for different reasons. So we went to Rwanda. We went, this was in Rwanda with one of the kids, and the same thing with the whole community. We carried the kids through the community. And each time we would actually gather everyone, all the kids around a large picnic. And so we would do that same process in each of the places. Sometime we would do this project called Inside Out. And Inside Out is a project that I started with my team in 2011, where basically if you want to do a project in your neighborhood, it could be here in the Hamptons or anywhere, and you're like, it could be that you want to save, a local store, and you're about to close the store, and you want to keep it, and you want to show how the whole community is behind it. If you call me to come and do it, there's little chance that I can actually come and do that. So I would say, you know what, now take the photos, send them to me, I'll print them at the studio, and then I'll ship it back to you. And you know what, if you can't pay for it, it doesn't matter, we'll send it to you for free. As long as you're not affiliated with a brand or an organization, as long as it's a people project, we'll always ship it for free anywhere in the world. And so this is those kind of projects that we've been doing. So anywhere you're traveling in the world and you see those posters, we've sent 500,000, so there's quite a few. I never pasted those. Those are the people, the community who pasted them. And so those projects is happening in places where they fight for democracy or in places, in schools. In New York, we're pasting a school every 5 days. The kids are doing it, and the teachers are involved in this. So it's really something to get the community together for lots of different reasons. And this was one of the furthest places, actually, we went in Mauritania. This is a place that it's so far in, at the end of the desert, that I've never heard of it, And UNHCR told me, this is the most remote refugee camp in the world. You have to cross the entire desert to get there. There are people leaving Mali because of the war, and so they end up there at this end of the desert, but they don't expect for anyone to come there because they're so remote. And so we did that giant procession also with one of the kids in the desert, and it was very moving because when we did that picnic at the end, they would play kind of electric guitar at the end of the desert. It was a very surreal thing. But it was a very complicated place to get to. And then we kept on going. They did also some Inside Out there with the kids of the school. This one was in Colombia. And all those kids, people were like, okay, well, they're all running in a different position. And so there was one thing that I couldn't, show when we were doing this, because all of those kids were being carried by their own community. But I was trying to link the project so that people would understand that they're actually all connected, that they're actually all of them are going through the same thing, but it's just in a total different context. And so it was actually last January, Oh yeah, we did this one also in Lesbos for the people who just arrived. This is in Greece, in one of the islands that's the closest from Turkey. So people who arrive from Afghanistan and a lot of places in Africa, they arrive from here. And so we gathered all those images, and this was in Torino, Italy, where the border patrol guy came, and we started from 5 different points in the city, and people would carry the actual image, and they would all arrive from different places, and then they would meet on the main square of, there's a giant square there in Torino, and as the kids come together, they would do a whole ballet basically where people walk all around, with all the kids, and then at the end brings them together, and then there was actually a perfect position to put them in, that if you put them in together, it looks like they run together. And so from the beginning, we were trying to always make them run in a certain way, and it was very hard to photograph just so that they could match, in scale at the end. So I don't know how much time we have, so that if I open to Q&A or if I wait. 10 minutes more. 10 minutes more in total? Okay. We have 15 minutes. In total? Yes. So I'll open for questions, and this way I can show more images. Anyone have a question? Yes. So the way we enlarge it is in the favela, for example, it's an architect plan machines. So they print plans. When you see a building, plans for building, it's always a few lines, that tells you, and then you're like, oh, we're going to do it again. So we use that machine, except that we send it, just a part of the file, and it prints black on it. And the thing is, those machines are not made to print photography, but they do it incredibly well. But people don't know that. And the only thing is, when you go to a place to print those kind of plans, architect plans, it's pretty cheap, but because the actual person that prints it he pays every month the same amount of money to Xerox or whatever, so that he gets, a couple bucks of ink. Where I would go and print, suddenly they say we need 20 times more ink, So one day the head of Xerox, France, whatever, he came and he said, I'm sorry guys, all of those other guys pay the same amount of money as you, but you order like 20 times more of those boxes of ink. What's going on? And I said, oh yeah, we have a little problem. We're helping this young French artist, and he's called JR, and he's printing his black and white thing, and he's ruining all our ink. And then the guy actually said, oh, that's cool, I'll close my eyes, I'll keep sending. And I met him 10 years later, that guy, when he switched job and he was working for another big printing company. And he said, I was the one who closed my eyes so that you could print for so cheap. And it's very interesting because that's actually how I was able to do it for all those years. Then I still do the exact same thing, except I have the printer at home. But when I do those, I use different fabric so that we actually can roll them. So depending then of the technique, even here in the museum, which are photos from Mauritania, from the middle of the desert, where those kids were playing football, but I turned those images in negative. When you turn them in negative, you see them here, they actually, it's almost like you see the heat of the body, It's suddenly they look like they're playing on the moon. They just come out of time, and you don't even see the ball there. You just see those movements. And it's just that moment where those children still have the innocence before they realize the weight of what's going on around them. And so that was what I was focusing on this whole project. Yes?
So you are a magnet really for grown-ups and children, but I know you also have charity organizations that benefit specifically children. Can you tell us about them?
Yeah, let me see if I have the image here further in the thing. So, for example, if I take the example of the favela in Brazil, we actually went back there, and let's see. Now I don't have it here, but in the favela in Brazil, on the top of it, we actually bought a house in 2009, so a year after doing this project on the favela, and we made a school there. And then that school is now open since 15 years, so some of the kids we had in the school were like maybe 7 when they started, and now they're 20-something. So the continuity of projects have been one of the most interesting part, actually, that we've done it. For example, in Kenya, the one I showed you with the train, we've been covering roof with the faces of the people. So on my website, you can see all of those images because you know, each of those projects have had a continuation. You know, in the first one, the one I showed you in the projects in France, in that neighborhood where the riot started, we have continued walking there for 20 years until the president of France came in that neighborhood, which he never did, and acknowledged the art as being a French monument. So now the art is installed there permanently, depicting the actual riots that happened. And so by doing this, which was a very interesting, you know, strong moment, because by doing this, by coming there in the neighborhood, and saying now this is part of our French history, it meant that the people that live there suddenly felt part of the history of France, where they are like me, second generation immigrants that were never depicted in the museum. And so they never felt part of what they would see when they walk in the Louvre or any other museum. And so all of this part of the process and continuing in one community is very important. And where we've done it the most with kids is in Brazil, because that school is still running. It's called Casa Amarela. But in all of those places, it's really one thing that, that we keep doing. There's one thing I can show you here, actually, that I just found when I was, is the video of having tea with the Border Patrol guy. He say, I hope this is tea, you know. And he was really nice. I mean, he's really nice. So he sent me this, this thing that I have at my studio, which is a real piece of the wall with a plate that says, you know, the Border Patrol want to honor you by your whatever. But it's kind of weird because I have a part of the wall at home, you know. And so I always feel conflicted about that, but it's kind of interesting because I know it comes from a good place. Any other question while we have time? Yes.
Merci pour ton travail, c'est super inspirant.
Thank you.
I said French to my colleague. We started to use your plate years ago when you had 2 hands.
Oh, yes.
For our first Charlie Gala, so I want to thank you for that.
Oh, thank you.
But there's another question about your art, because you're a multi-hyphenate artist. How would you inspire my son, who's not 9, who's exposed to social media, and you know a lot of people use social media as art right now.
Yeah.
But you transcended it from movie to photo to street art. What would be your message to a young kid right now?
Well, you know,
Change the world.
it's actually that the most interesting part is to go out there and see things with your own eyes, you know. And so that's why at that place in the border, I built this giant kid looking over, but I made it big enough so that, you know, if you were close by, you would have drove by to see it, you know, you would have go and take a photo of it. Now, it's not about how beautiful is the piece, it's your journey to see the piece. Because going there, something would have happened to you. It's that a border patrol would have asked you, what are you doing there? You would have met someone through the fence. You would have, something would have happened of the fact that you came out of your daily routine. So anything in all of my projects is to get you out of your daily routine, to come to something that's actually fun, but also that opens your eyes on another issue. Now, for you, you know, you can actually use your dad phone and take portraits of your friend, and then you'll send them to me through the website. I'll print them for you and I'll ship them back to you. And suddenly, with all your friends, you can start pasting them on your school or on your neighbor's wall or whoever gives you the permit to do it. But the fun part is actually pasting them, you know, and you realize that it doesn't matter if the photo is sharp or not sharp, beautiful, not beautiful. It's just this moment of pasting it will be the memory you'll carry with you. You know, those photos will not stay forever on the wall. They would go at some point, but you never forget that that day you had to struggle and find a ladder, and then you had no more glue, and the neighbors came and helped you, and suddenly you'd encounter people that you would never had really a chance to talk with. And that suddenly, you know, you start a conversation. And those are very important moments that social media takes off of our life because they keep us behind the screen. And there's nothing better than walking towards someone else. Merci. Thank you. Yes.
It's amazing your fearlessness. And the first image when you were in the slum in Paris, I'm just so fascinated by what what drove you to do that. Like, was there something early on in your life, or I mean, all the things that you've tried and done is obviously amazing. But
Thank you.
I sense this fearlessness.
No, sometimes I got scared. I went to North Korea. I realized, I better go back home, So I pasted a sticker the size of my finger here. And I felt,
To add to that, the freedom in which you, engage the world and share your vision is such a beautiful thing. I'm just fascinated by, what made,
I think,
drove you to do that.
it's a good question. It's a great question. I mean, yes, I was not exposed to art, so I don't have that, that stress or that, this is what it should look like or this is how it should fit in. Or I didn't even know that, normally you need to make a wall, like a book and show it to a gallery of someone who decides if you. So I felt really free of going out there and doing it. I didn't even felt the stress of how people would look at it. Now when I think about it, I'm glad I started at that pace because then you don't think about the critics, you just do it. And sometimes people pee on it, scratch it down, write on it, doesn't matter. It's interesting to see how actually people respond to it. But to be honest, I think, when I was young, I was exposed to a lot of social issues around me in the neighborhood I grew up. And I guess, graffiti was one thing where you had to be street smart doing it, but I was not excellent at it. I was just had the balls to write my name, but not much more to it. And so I guess, I don't know, when I found that camera and I started taking photos, I found more of a use of what I could do with it. Now, it's really one thing that led to another. Like that's why I only showed you those couple photos. It's just because it's one project led to another, led to another. And I'm still in that journey. I'm still in like that one thing led to another. Because I don't have a plan of career. Well, this is one I want to be, or this is where I want to exhibit. To me, it's more about the experience. I realize that it's the process that is really the most important. And so we have a saying in my studio that says, it's going to be all right, because it's always hectic to do those, Like in the favelas, you get shot at. In other places, you get evicted. But the truth is, at the end, it becomes stories. And it's just paper and glue, And so the fact that it's just paper and glue, I always think, okay, it's okay. How bad can it be if it's just pasting paper and glue? And so those journeys and those experiences, those encounters, have what drove me, and realizing the impact also that art can have. And in some places, I've started measuring it. It's hard when even when you walk 20 years in one neighborhood, you see the change. And you realize, wow, the president came and actually the people felt recognized, and the mayor actually, who's still the mayor today, 20 years later, he's still the mayor. And so then we talked, and I included him in some of my artwork years after. My friend, who's holding the camera like a gun, made his first movie 20 years after and was nominated for an Oscar. So, it's like all those things, you realize, wow, the art have an impact, and it grows in people or in communities without being elitist in any way, by just being a power of the community. And not too long ago, we've done a project in a prison in California. And in that prison, actually, we actually pasted all the inmates and the guards and the victims. So what you're looking at here is it looks like a hole, but it's actually a courtyard. So look, if I zoom in, you see here, those are the tables. This is the basketball playground. And so this is flat, it's full flat. And this was 4 years ago. There's an app where when you click on everyone, you click on him, boom, you hear his audio. You click on this person, you hear his audio. But what they wanted to record. Because of that, half of the inmates that had even life in prison got freed after that. But thank you. It's not because the photo is beautiful, the light is there. It's have nothing to do with that. It's just because the process of actually pasting those images in the prison and with all those guys and stuff, the process of pasting make those guards meet the inmates, in a maximum security, they don't talk to each other. There's a real way of dehumanizing people. But in the way of pasting wallpaper, you have to talk to the guy next door because you have to make sure the two strips align, So it's as stupid as that. We just had to make a giant puzzle and everybody had to participate. So all the inmates pasted and that's what actually created change in there. Because then the guards could not recognize them the next day. And then after 6 months, after a year, where they'll say, well, if you change in a maximum security prison, no one will notice it. But if suddenly, the guards start noticing you, and then when they go in front of a board every year, they say, well, do you mind writing something, sir, for me? We pasted 2 years ago, you remember? And, you can look at my file. I haven't done anything in 5 or 10 years. And then the guy will say, yeah, I see. I've been watching you. I've listened to your story. I'll write something. And because of that, then it becomes a proof. And so those guys get freed one after the other. And it's incredible. And it's like really something that they've done their time. Some done already 20 years. A lot of them were because of the tree strike, So I took a bunch of guys who entered when they were kids because of the tree strike. So they do 3 minor crimes in California and took life in prison. And so, or some guys that would actually enter for 2 years and then in prison would be taken into gangs and then their sentence would get longer. And so this is one of the projects that we could do and realize how the impact actually, you could measure it because it's a closed wall. So, you see who's coming out in and out and you see what changed. So it's one of the worst prisons in the US. It's called Tehachapi and in this prison, they've never done even a film screening, So when you do something like that, you actually see what art is actually creating around there. Yes. So and then.
Just one observation. It seems to me that you, in your work, not unlike Jean-Claude and Christo, you create community, which is magnificent.
Thank you.
And my question is, now that from being a kid in Paris, doing that wonderful project, to now having the backing of one of the great galleries, Pariton, how does that affect your practice as you go forward?
Yeah, so from the beginning I realized, okay, when you do this kind of work, how do you finance it? And so usually in the world we live in today, brands takes over everything. So it's like, I could present you this powered by Coca-Cola. And I say, well, we helped everyone and Coca-Cola made them. But it wouldn't be the same project because you're like, am I looking at a commercial or am I looking at an art project? So I've always removed any kind of sponsoring from any of my work. Brands are not authorized to sponsor my work. So that's a thing that I've done since day one. So very early I was like, okay, how am I going to finance this? And so the first one who signed me when I was 21 was Banksy. And so he had just opened a gallery in London. And he exhibited my work and started selling it in a gallery that was called Lazarides, which was the name of his agent. And so I stayed with them for a couple of years. And then Perrotin came and found me and then started selling my art and then Pace and then Continua and those galleries. And, all the artworks that get sold, people don't know that because I don't say it, I don't post about it, but the money goes back into the projects. That's how I'm able to do so much. Like Christo and Jean-Claude, which is a great example. Those were some of the rare artists that self-finance everything they do. But to a way bigger scale than I do. Some of their projects would cost 12 millions, and they'll self-finance it. And I met them. I met Christo because Jean-Claude had passed away already, but I spent a lot of time with Christo. He came to see my shows. I went to see him on his projects, and it gave me a lot of hope that it is possible, actually, to do this without having to necessarily sell out. And so it's an interesting, harder journey, but the truth is I've been lucky to have people collecting my art, and I don't produce much piece a year because I produce what I need to do my projects. I'm not looking to, you know, like play with the market or anything like that. And so this is how I've been able to do each of those projects. And then when I was standing in front of the head of the drug dealer in the favela and who say, well, who sent you and who's paying for this? I say, well, I'm paying for it. So if you have a problem, you come to me. And if you don't want it, you know, I'll take it down. There's no one else involved in this. And that also what had made it able to in all those community. Yes.
Can you tell us about the children who are
Running outside. Yeah, those are the kids from Mauritania. That's the story I was telling a bit before about. I can go back to the image, but it's called the Children of Uranus, and they were playing in the desert in Mauritania, in that place I went, and I turned them into negative so that you see them. They were before. I'll tell you right after because I showed it before, but with pleasure. Yes.
So yes, you are paying for it, thank you. But also you need to have community champions because the community aspect of your work is so important. And I'm wondering, how do you identify the local champions who will take the project forward with you?
It's very true. You know, a lot of people are always down to come and paste. And so that's easy if we say, oh, let's cover this museum, and we say we need volunteers. People are always down to come and help, and that's incredible. So I have a big team, but we also have constantly people coming and help. Now, the people that do the project by themselves in their community, usually they're the one who identify us and say, hey, I want to do that. They contact us. We have a website called Inside Out Project, and the team speak every language at the studio here in New York. And then all day they're like, hey, so this is my problem. I'm in Colombia. I'm in this country or this country. This is what I want to do. You know, like just 2 weeks ago when I went back to Torino, and there's a woman who came and she said, look, you know, I lost my daughter because she was sitting on a bench and a drunk driver like hit the bench and killed her. And there's actually hundreds of parents like me who lost their children. And I say, oh, it's interesting that you tell me that because I met someone in Paris who have the exact same thing. He's a chef called Jean-Luc Aleno, Yannick Aleno, and he lost his son, actually. He's a Michelin star chef. And so he also reached out to me, and I said, well, you know, maybe that would be an incredible Inside Out project if we want to show either the kids, either the parents who actually remain. But that's on you. You decide. I'm happy to actually brainstorm with you, but it will be your project. And so this is usually how it starts. Then they reach out to the team, and this is how a project starts. But a lot of people, because the stories, you know, affect them much more, and they're the one who carry, they're the one that would be the spokesperson. But they also happen in schools, and suddenly it's about understanding diversity and each other's language. People paint them or draw on them. It's, you know, it's only a piece of art if you say it's a piece of art. If not, it's a piece of paper, or it's a piece of propaganda. It's a piece of whatever people decide to do with it. Yes.
I believe we're going to host an Inside Out on October 8th.
Oh,
Can you
yes.
tell us a little bit what it is, and then we close with your
Yes.
So October 8th, Inside Out.
So there'll be an Inside Out here, and we'll have the photo booth truck here. So, which is amazing because sometimes we actually bring the printer inside the photo booth, inside the truck. So you walk inside the truck, and 2 seconds later, your poster prints gigantically on the side. We actually have been doing that each time, like we took those trucks all around the world, because sometimes, like you say, there's not a community leader who say, hey. So when we drove with those trucks, people suddenly say, well, that's great that you stop here, but I wanted to do it over there. And we say, no problems. Use the website. We'll still send them to you. And so that's how we've been, you know, this is a project that progressed slowly. It's not a campaign. It's more like it's an art project. It's very grassroots. It could die at any moment, you know. If you have more people, because you have the choice to pay or to do it for free. But we don't check your bank account to know. If you say I can't pay, we just send them to you. But believe it or not, 40 to 50% of people say, you know what, I can pay, so I'll just send some money and pay for someone else. And at first, we thought this project would last, you know, 6 months. It's been 12 or 13 years, so yes.
And we're at time. One question.
One question, okay, so you're the last one.
Can you tell us about the next project, and do you have a dream project?
Yes, I mean, you know, I've always have an ear out. There's one that I can say now that there's a good chance that it happened. It's right after the summer in Paris. I'm working on a project that will happen right in the heart of Paris, which I'm very excited about. But I have to work on it. So earlier today I was preparing it, and there's another project in Amazonia that I should go there. I've been there for the first time 2 months ago, and we're preparing a project in November there. And then there's often other projects that I do at the same time. So we usually do, a few projects at the same time, and some, because of the constraints and because of we're waiting for the right moment to do it, takes longer than others. But there's the prison project was not meant to happen. It's just because there was in this mural I can show you here, to get a permit to go to prison is too crazy. And so in this mural, this is just one section of a mural. It's like 10 times longer with 1,300 people. But in this mural was a guy that was, kind of half anonymous, but he was not known at all with the suit over there. And when someone called him years later, because he became the governor of California, and said, I'm trying to get this French artist to do a project, he was like, I don't know what you're talking about. He's like, yeah, it's this artist who do black and white, and sometimes he records people's story, and he say, wait, sir, but I was in a mural once at MoMA in San Francisco. They put me in this thing, I was just walking in the street, and they went into this truck, and I ended up there with my story. Is that the same artist? And the guy said, yes, that's him. He said, oh, wow, give him full clearance for any prison in California. And that's how I ended up there. Thank you. Thank you.